That serum will kill you. Princess Lyra didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her silver eyes were locked on the open wound across Daniel Cross's forearm, and the vial of glowing blue liquid in his hand. Blood ran between his fingers. Lyra took one step toward him. Put it down. Daniel looked at the vial. Why? Because that compound destroys tissue when it regenerates too quickly. Daniel glanced at his arm. Then why are you looking at me like I'm already dead? Because I know what it does. Daniel raised the vial. No, you know what it does to other species. Lyra froze. Daniel. He broke the seal. Don't. The serum touched the wound. For 1 second, nothing. Then every monitor in the chamber screamed. Daniel's arm locked. His fingers clenched. The scanner flashed red. Lyra rushed toward him. Daniel! He sucked in a sharp breath. Blue light spread beneath the skin around the wound. Lyra stared at the scanner. His cellular activity is increasing. The researcher beside her leaned toward the display. How much? Lyra didn't answer. The numbers kept climbing. That's impossible. Daniel looked down. The wound wasn't closing. It wasn't healing. Something was moving beneath it. Lyra. She looked at him. I can feel something. What? I don't know. The chamber lights flickered. Once, twice. Then everything went black. A deep metallic pulse traveled through the floor. Nobody moved. Another pulse. Lyra slowly turned toward the sealed doors. That isn't medical equipment. Daniel listened. A third pulse shook the room. The researcher whispered, Where is that coming from? Lyra checked the emergency panel. Not this chamber. Daniel looked at her. Then where? She stared into the darkness. Somewhere deeper inside the ship. The scanner suddenly rebooted. One line appeared. Unknown biological response detected. Lyra's face went still. Then a second line appeared. Subject human. Daniel looked at her. What does that mean? I don't know. You're the medical expert. Yes. And you've never seen it before? Lyra stared at the screen. No. The ship's automated voice suddenly echoed through the chamber. Medical containment protocol initiated. Lyra turned toward the doors. Why is containment activating? Daniel didn't answer. He was listening again. A faint vibration traveled through the walls. Slow, rhythmic. Almost like something was responding. Lyra finally heard it too. Her voice dropped. That started after the serum. Daniel looked at the wound. No. He shook his head. It started because of the serum. 27 minutes earlier, Lyra had believed human biology was predictable. She had spent 20 years proving it. Daniel Cross was about to prove her wrong. The Aurelia was carrying representatives from 12 civilizations toward Vera for the Galactic Council's first permanent human-alien medical exchange. Lyra was the expedition's medical authority. She knew the Helian regenerative serum was dangerous. What she didn't know was whether human biology would obey the same rules. The first clue arrived on Engineering Deck 4. A pressure conduit ruptured without warning. A support frame tore loose above 3 alien technicians. Daniel Cross saw it first. He shoved all 3 out of the way. The frame crashed down. A jagged piece of metal ripped through his sleeve and opened his forearm. Blood splashed across the floor. One technician screamed. Daniel didn't. He looked toward the damaged conduit. Valve 7. Nobody moved. Daniel raised his voice. Valve 7, shut it down! An engineer rushed to the controls. The valve closed. The pressure dropped. The shaking stopped. Only then did Daniel look at his own arm. Lyra arrived seconds later. She expected panic. Instead, she found the human sitting against the wall, wrapping cloth around his wound. You're bleeding. Daniel looked down. Yeah. You need treatment. Probably. Lyra stared at him. Probably. Daniel looked past her toward the machinery. Did everyone get clear? She checked. The 3 technicians were alive. Daniel nodded. Good. Then he tried to stand. Lyra pushed him back down. You're going to the medical chamber. I need to check the pressure valve. Someone else can do it. Daniel pointed toward the conduit. They won't know which one is sticking. Lyra frowned. How do you know? I heard it. Heard what? The vibration. Lyra looked at the machinery. The sensors showed nothing. Then an engineer shouted from the control station. Valve 6 is fluctuating. Daniel glanced at Lyra. Told you. She looked at him differently after that. Not because he was stronger, because he noticed things her instruments didn't. Inside the medical chamber, Lyra scanned Daniel's arm. The wound was deep. His vital signs were stable. Almost strangely stable. She ran the scan again. The result barely changed. His cellular repair response was slightly above the established human baseline. Nothing impossible. Just unusual.
How long has your body healed like this?
Daniel shrugged. I don't know. You've never been tested? Not seriously. Why? Never needed to be. Before Lyra could respond, a researcher entered carrying a sealed silver case. She recognized it immediately. No. The researcher stopped. I haven't said anything. You were going to suggest the Helian regenerative serum. It could close the wound in seconds. It could destroy his cells. Daniel looked at the case. What exactly does it do? Lyra answered carefully. It forces damaged tissue into accelerated regeneration. Sounds useful. It isn't designed for humans. How dangerous? For some species? Yes. Fatal. Daniel looked at the case. And humans? Lyra hesitated. We don't know. Daniel studied her face. But you said it'll kill me. Because every model we have suggests your cells won't tolerate it. Daniel nodded. Then reached toward the case. Lyra caught his wrist. Don't. He looked at her. You really think I'll die? Yes. And if you're wrong? Lyra said nothing. Daniel looked at the vial. Then at his wound. This isn't bravery, Lyra said. I know. This isn't an experiment you can undo. I know. Then why? Daniel glanced toward the medical doors. Beyond them were the engineers, the technicians he'd pushed away from the falling frame. The people still working to keep the station alive. Then he looked back at Lyra. Because if your models are wrong, he took the vial. We should know. Lyra slowly released his wrist. Daniel. He broke the seal. She stepped toward him. Wait. Daniel looked at her. Lyra stared at his open wound. Her voice became almost a whisper. That serum will kill you. Daniel tilted the vial. Maybe. He poured it. The monitors screamed. The lights died. And somewhere deep inside the Aurelia, something answered. Daniel slowly turned toward the sound. Lyra stared into the darkness. The serum hadn't healed him. It hadn't killed him. It had done something neither of them could explain. And the question was no longer whether Daniel would survive. It was much worse. Why had the serum reacted to him? The pulse came again. Daniel stared into the darkness. Lyra stared at him. Neither spoke. Then the emergency lights returned. Dim red light filled the medical chamber. The blue glow beneath Daniel's skin was gone. The wound was still open, but the bleeding had stopped. Lyra slowly raised her scanner. Don't move. Daniel glanced at her. I wasn't planning to. She scanned his arm. Her expression tightened. The display showed normal human tissue. No abnormal growth. No cellular collapse. Nothing. Lyra scanned again. Still nothing. That shouldn't be possible. Daniel looked at the screen. What? The response disappeared. She lowered the scanner. But whatever caused it didn't. The researcher checked the medical network. Princess, containment is still active. Why? He shook his head. The system isn't giving us a reason. Lyra looked toward the sealed doors. Can you override it? I tried. The display flashed. Authorization denied. Daniel stood. Lyra immediately stopped him. Sit down. I'm fine. You were just exposed to an experimental regenerative compound. And I'm still standing. That isn't the same thing. Daniel looked at the scanner. What does it say? Lyra hesitated. Your cells are normal. Daniel waited. She continued. Your biological signature isn't. He frowned. What changed? There is no model for it. Can you reverse it? Lyra looked directly at him. I don't know what I'm reversing yet. A metallic click came from the corridor. Everyone turned. Then another. The medical doors unlocked. Lyra stepped backward. Nobody opened those. The doors slid apart. The corridor outside was empty. No medics, no security, no engineers, only dim emergency lighting. Daniel took one step forward. Lyra grabbed his arm. Don't. He stopped. Why? She pointed toward the floor. A thin blue line was glowing along the corridor wall. Daniel stared at it. That wasn't there before. No. The line pulsed. Once, then again. Daniel moved one step backward. The light stopped. He moved forward. It followed. Lyra's expression changed. Daniel, I see it. The researcher raised his scanner. The device immediately began producing warning tones. What is that signal? Lyra watched the blue line. It isn't a signal. Daniel looked at her. Then what is it? She swallowed. It looks like a response. The line suddenly split. One branch continued deeper into the corridor. The other disappeared directly into the medical wall. Daniel frowned. That wall isn't connected to anything. Lyra checked the ship schematic. She went silent. Daniel looked at her. What? She turned the display toward him. There is no system behind that wall. The blue light pulsed again. Daniel's wound flashed beneath his skin. Lyra stared at him. The connection was becoming impossible to ignore. The Aurelia had been in orbit for 6 years. 6 years of inspections, 6 years of scans, 6 years of people insisting they knew every system aboard the ship. Lyra had believed them. She no longer did. She moved Daniel into the observation laboratory and sealed the door. I'm going to compare your cellular structure before and after the serum. Daniel sat on the examination platform. Go ahead. The scanner activated. A holographic image of his cells appeared. Lyra studied it. Normal. Daniel sighed. You've said that already. I wasn't looking at your cells. She enlarged the surrounding tissue. A faint pattern appeared around the wound. Daniel leaned forward. What is that? Lyra increased the magnification. The pattern became clearer. Tiny structures surrounded the damaged tissue in perfect symmetry. Those aren't blood vessels. Daniel looked at her. Nerves? No. Then what? Lyra changed the scan frequency. The pattern disappeared. She froze. Scan again. The researcher did. Nothing. Lyra changed the frequency. The pattern returned. Daniel stared. You're telling me something is there only when the scanner is looking at it a certain way? I'm telling you our standard medical scanners weren't designed to detect it. She enlarged the pattern again. It formed a precise circular structure around the wound. Not random, not damaged tissue. Something organized. Lyra's expression tightened. Daniel. What? This formed after the serum entered your bloodstream. Daniel looked at the pattern. So the serum changed me? Not exactly. She pointed at the display. It looks like the serum triggered something that was already there. Daniel became still. You're saying I already had this? I can't prove that. But you think I did. Lyra looked at him. Yes. Daniel stared at the pattern. Then why did the serum recognize it? Lyra didn't answer immediately, because that was the question she couldn't escape. The serum wasn't supposed to recognize human tissue. It was designed to accelerate regeneration. Yet the moment it touched Daniel's wound, something inside him had responded. Not with rejection, not with resistance, with recognition. Lyra stood abruptly. Run the serum analysis again. The researcher frowned. We already analyzed it. Again? He inserted a sample into the analyzer. The machine processed it, then stopped. A warning appeared. Reference database not found. The researcher stared. That can't be right. Lyra entered the compound's identification code manually. The system rejected it. She entered it again. Nothing. Daniel looked at her. You said this was a standard Helian compound. It is. Then why doesn't your database recognize it? Lyra stared at the screen. It should. Daniel looked at her. But it doesn't. No. She entered the code again. The system rejected it. Then the analyzer activated by itself. A new message appeared. Biological match detected. Lyra stopped. Daniel looked at the screen. Match with what? The system displayed one word. Human. Silence. Daniel slowly turned toward Lyra. That makes no sense. No. But the serum wasn't designed for humans. It wasn't. Then why does it have a human match? Lyra's eyes remained fixed on the screen. Because the match isn't coming from the serum. Daniel frowned. Then where? Lyra looked at him. From you. The analyzer went black. Every screen in the laboratory shut down. Then they all came back at once. A new message appeared. Secondary biological system detected. Daniel stared. On the ship? The system responded, location unavailable. Can you track it? Negative. Can you identify it? Negative. Lyra looked toward the ceiling. The answer was already becoming clear. The system wasn't detecting a biological system somewhere on the ship. It was detecting something the ship itself had never known existed. Daniel suddenly touched his forearm. The circular pattern had returned. Blue light traced its edges. Lyra stepped closer. Don't touch it. Daniel looked at her. I'm not. The pattern changed. A second circle formed inside the first. Daniel stared at it. I've seen that before. Lyra looked at him. Where? Daniel's eyes narrowed. I don't know. She waited. He rubbed his forehead. I remember seeing something like it when I was a kid. Lyra's expression sharpened. How old? 12. What happened? Daniel looked away. I got sick. From what? I don't remember. You don't remember the illness? I remember the hospital. And what happened there? Daniel closed his eyes. I remember waking up. Lyra watched him carefully. Nothing before that? Daniel shook his head. Nothing. The scanner suddenly emitted a sharp tone. Lyra looked down. The reading wasn't coming from Daniel. She turned. A signal was coming from the wall. The same wall the blue corridor line had disappeared into. Lyra slowly raised the scanner. The reading increased. Daniel stepped beside her. The wall vibrated. Very faintly, almost imperceptibly. Thump. Daniel's wound flashed blue. Lyra looked at him. It's responding to you. Daniel stared at the wall. No. He shook his head. It's not responding to me. Another pulse. Thump. Daniel's voice dropped. It's responding to whatever is inside me. The wall suddenly lit up. A thin blue symbol appeared across its surface. Lyra stopped breathing. Daniel looked at her. You recognize it? She didn't answer. Lyra. She stared at the symbol. It's ancient. How ancient? Older than the council. Daniel looked back at the wall. What does it mean? Lyra's voice became barely audible. It was used by the Helian medical order before the council existed. For medical purposes? Lyra shook her head. No. She stared at the glowing symbol. It was a warning. The symbol pulsed. Lyra finally translated the inscription. Do not wake what is sleeping. Daniel looked down at his arm. The blue pattern beneath his skin pulsed once. Then the entire Aurelia went silent. No engines. No alarms. No ventilation. Nothing. For 3 seconds, the ship seemed completely dead. Then a voice came through the darkness. Not the ship's automated voice. Not Lyra's. Not Daniel's. Something deeper. Something that had been waiting. And it spoke only 2 words. He remembers. The screen went black. Daniel clenched his jaw. Again? The researcher tried. The same result. Lyra stared at the terminal. Someone doesn't want this opened. Daniel looked at her. Someone already knew I'd find it. The lights flickered. A faint blue pulse moved through the wall. Daniel suddenly grabbed the edge of the table. His eyes unfocused. Lyra rushed toward him. Daniel? He didn't respond. The laboratory disappeared. For a moment, he wasn't standing aboard the Aurelia. He was somewhere else. A white room. Cold lights. A metal table beneath him. He was 12 years old. Small. Confused. Terrified. Someone was standing beside the table. Not human. Daniel tried to see the face. The image blurred. A voice spoke. Hold him still. Another voice answered. He's waking up. Daniel felt something cold against his arm. A blue liquid. The same color. The same pulse. Then a woman screamed. Stop the procedure. The memory shattered. Daniel gasped. He was back inside the laboratory. Lyra was holding his shoulder. Daniel. He stared at her. I remember. What? The serum. Lyra froze. What did you see? A room. Where? I don't know. Who was there? Daniel closed his eyes. Someone was treating me. Human? He shook his head. No. Lyra's expression changed. What did they look like? I couldn't see. Daniel looked at his forearm. But I remember the color. Blue. Lyra slowly lowered her scanner. The same color as the serum. Daniel nodded. Then the researcher spoke. Princess. Neither looked at him. He pointed toward the terminal. The archived file is changing. Lyra turned. The previously locked medical record was opening by itself. Lines of text appeared one after another. Procedure date 19 years prior. Species human. Subject status viable. External technology interaction confirmed. Daniel stared. External technology? Lyra read the next line. Her face went pale. Source non-human origin. Silence. Daniel whispered. You knew. Lyra looked at him. I didn't. Daniel's expression hardened. But they knew. Lyra said nothing. The file continued loading. Then one final entry appeared. Memory suppression successful. Daniel stopped. What? Lyra stared at the words. Your memory was deliberately suppressed. Daniel's breathing changed. You're saying someone erased this? Yes. Why? Lyra didn't answer. The researcher suddenly looked toward the laboratory door. Princess. The blue line outside had returned. But this time it wasn't moving toward Daniel. It was moving toward the medical archive. Lyra watched it approach the sealed door. Then stop. The line formed a circle on the floor. A second symbol appeared inside it. Daniel recognized it immediately. His face went pale. That was in my memory. Lyra turned. You saw that symbol? Daniel nodded. On the table. The researcher backed away. Princess, the archive is receiving a signal. From where? He checked the readings. His face drained of color. Earth. Daniel stared at him. What? Lyra stepped toward the console. That is impossible. The Aurelia isn't linked to Earth. The researcher shook his head. It isn't using the communications network. Daniel looked at him. Then how? The researcher slowly raised his eyes. We don't know. A pause. Then, but whatever is transmitting it is responding to him. Daniel stared at the screen. Lyra's voice dropped. Something on Earth knows you're here. No. Daniel looked at her. Something on Earth knows what I am. The pulse came again. Every screen in the laboratory displayed the same message. Remote biological response detected. The archive opened one final file. A photograph appeared. It showed a 12-year-old Daniel lying unconscious on a medical table. Standing behind him were three figures. Two were human. The third was unmistakably alien. Lyra stared at the image. Her voice disappeared. Daniel stepped closer. I don't remember that. Lyra zoomed in on the alien figure. Her eyes widened, because she recognized the insignia on its uniform. It belonged to the Helian Medical Order, but the photograph was 19 years old, and according to every official record, the Helian Medical Order had never visited Earth. The image suddenly distorted. A final line appeared beneath it. Memory suppression compromised. Then another. Subject has remembered the first contact. Daniel stared at the screen. Lyra slowly turned toward him. Daniel. He looked at her. What? You weren't the first human to encounter this technology. Daniel's face hardened. Then who was? Lyra looked back at the photograph. Your doctors. A pause. And whoever came for you. The lights went out again. This time, before the darkness swallowed the room, Daniel heard a whisper directly beside his ear. A voice he had not heard in 19 years. We knew you would remember. The whisper disappeared. Daniel stood frozen in the darkness. We knew you would remember. Then the emergency lights returned. Lyra was the first to speak. Did you hear that? Daniel looked at her. It was right beside me. The researcher shook his head. I didn't hear anything. Lyra checked the room. Every microphone was active. Every sensor was running. Nothing. No movement. No additional life sign. No unauthorized transmission. Nothing except the photograph still glowing on the main screen. Three figures. Two human. One Helian. And a 12-year-old Daniel Cross lying unconscious beneath them. Lyra stared at the insignia on the alien's uniform. Then she stepped backward. That's impossible. Daniel looked at her. You keep saying that. This time I mean it. She enlarged the insignia. The symbol became unmistakable. The Helian Medical Order, but beneath it was another marking. A black circle crossed by three silver lines. The researcher stared at it. Princess. Lyra didn't answer. What's that symbol? She swallowed. I've only seen it once. Where? In a sealed council archive. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What was it? Lyra looked at him. A warning. The laboratory doors suddenly locked. Every screen changed. Authorization level, Omega. Lyra turned toward the ceiling. Computer, unlock the laboratory. Access denied. Medical authority code. Access denied. Daniel looked at the door. Someone just took control. The researcher checked his console. Not someone. He turned the display toward Lyra. Multiple council systems just connected to the laboratory. Lyra's face hardened. They're watching us. A voice came through the speakers. Cold. Official. Controlled. Princess Lyra Varesh. Lyra stepped toward the console. Identify yourself. Galactic Council Security Directorate. Daniel laughed quietly. That's a lot of security for one injured mechanic. The voice ignored him. Step away from the medical archive. Lyra frowned. Under what authority? Emergency Biological Containment Protocol. Daniel looked at Lyra. That's new. It shouldn't exist. The voice continued. Subject Daniel Cross is to remain inside the laboratory. Daniel's expression changed. Subject? Lyra immediately stepped between him and the speaker. He is a council employee. He is no longer classified as an employee. Daniel looked toward the speaker. What am I classified as? The voice answered. Unknown. Daniel smiled without humor. That's comforting. Lyra's voice became sharper. You cannot detain a human based on an unknown biological reading. We are not detaining him because of the reading. We are detaining him because of what the reading resembles. Daniel stopped smiling. Lyra looked toward the screen. What does it resemble? The answer came slowly. First contact technology. The room went silent. Daniel looked at the photograph again. The Helian doctor. Yes. Why was your medical order on Earth 19 years ago? No answer. Daniel stepped closer to the speaker. Why was I on that table? Still nothing. Then the council voice said something that changed Lyra's expression completely. Because your world was not supposed to survive that encounter. Daniel stared. What does that mean? The voice disappeared. The doors unlocked. A new message appeared. Transfer order accepted. Subject Cross to be moved to Council Medical Authority vessel. Lyra immediately shook her head. No. The researcher looked at her. Princess? They're taking him. Daniel glanced toward the door. How long? Less than 3 minutes. He looked at his injured arm. Then at the photograph. Then we have 3 minutes. Lyra stared at him. For what? To find out why they're scared. The door opened. 4 security officers entered. Their armor was different from normal station security. Black, heavy, sealed. Each carried a compact restraint device. Daniel looked at them. You guys always dress like this for medical transfers? Nobody answered. Lyra stepped forward. He requires observation. The lead officer shook his head. He requires containment. He is injured. We know. He has a biological reaction that you clearly don't understand. We know. Lyra's eyes narrowed. Then what exactly do you know? The officer looked directly at Daniel. That he survived. Daniel frowned. Survived what? The officer didn't answer. Lyra noticed the hesitation. What happened 19 years ago? The officer remained silent. Daniel stepped forward. You know something about that photograph? The officer's eyes shifted toward the screen. Just for a second. But Daniel saw it. So you do? The officer said nothing. Lyra moved closer. Who authorized this transfer? The council. Which division? The officer hesitated. Special containment. Lyra's expression hardened. That division was dissolved. Officially. Silence. Daniel looked at Lyra. Officially? She didn't answer. The officer received a transmission. His helmet display flashed red. He touched his earpiece. Repeat. Everyone watched him. His expression changed. What happened? Lyra asked. He lowered his hand. The council vessel has arrived. Daniel looked toward the observation window. Outside, beyond the medical bay, a massive black ship had appeared against the stars. No identification lights, no registration, no visible markings. Just a dark hull hanging silently beside the Aurelia. The researcher stared. That isn't the council vessel. The officer turned sharply. What? The researcher checked the orbital sensors. It has no council signature. Lyra stepped toward the glass. No transponder? None. Daniel watched the vessel. Then whose ship is it? Nobody answered. A low vibration moved through the station. Daniel's wound flashed blue. Every security officer immediately raised their weapons. Lyra shouted, "Don't!" The blue light disappeared. The officers lowered their weapons slowly. The lead officer looked unsettled. That's why the council is afraid. Daniel stared at him. Afraid of what? The officer hesitated. Not you. Whatever is inside you. Daniel's expression changed. Lyra looked at the officer. You know what it is. I know what the council believes it is. What? The officer looked toward the photograph. The beginning. Daniel frowned. The beginning of what? The officer said nothing. The black vessel opened. No docking sequence. No mechanical clamps. A corridor simply extended from its hull toward the Aurelia. The researcher checked the telemetry. His face went pale. It's not docking. Lyra looked at him. Then what is it doing? He stared at the readings. I don't know. Daniel watched the corridor. It had stopped less than 20 meters from the Aurelia. No ship had crossed the distance. No engines had fired. No docking mechanism had activated. Yet the connection was there. The lead officer received another transmission. His expression became unreadable. Move. Daniel didn't move. Where? Council vessel. Lyra stepped beside him. I'm coming. No. I am his medical officer. You are now part of the investigation. Lyra's eyes narrowed. Then investigate me too. The officer looked at her. For several seconds, neither moved. Finally, he nodded. Fine. Daniel glanced at the photograph one last time. The image of his 12-year-old self was still there. But something had changed. The photograph had zoomed in. Not on the Helion doctor. Not on the medical table. On the second human figure standing behind him. A man, older, wearing a medical uniform. Daniel stared. He didn't recognize him. The file beneath the photograph began loading. Identity record Elias Cross. Daniel stopped breathing. Lyra looked at the name. Daniel. He said nothing. His eyes remained fixed on the screen. The researcher looked between them. You know that name. Daniel finally spoke. My father. Silence. Lyra looked back at the photograph. Then he was there. Daniel's expression hardened. That's impossible. The screen flickered. The blue symbol appeared across the photograph. The same symbol from his childhood. The same symbol that had awakened after the serum. Then the vessel outside transmitted a message. Not a warning. Not an order. Just 4 words. We found him. Daniel stared at the screen. Lyra whispered. Who? No answer came. The blue symbol pulsed once. Then the screen went completely black. The screen went completely black. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then, the emergency lights returned. Dim red light filled the laboratory. Daniel stared at the dead screen. Lyra looked toward the black vessel outside. The lead security officer remained frozen near the door. Then Daniel spoke. Who is it? No answer. He turned toward the officer. You said the council is afraid of what's inside me. The officer said nothing. Daniel stepped closer. You called it the beginning. Still nothing. Daniel's voice hardened. Then tell me what happened 19 years ago. The officer looked at Lyra. She nodded. Answer him. The officer slowly removed his helmet. For the first time, Daniel saw his face. He looked exhausted. Not afraid of Daniel. Afraid of the answer. Your father found something. Daniel stopped. My father? The officer nodded. 19 years ago, an object entered Earth's atmosphere. Lyra frowned. That isn't in the official first contact records. It wasn't supposed to be. Daniel stared at him. What kind of object? We never identified it. Where did it land? The officer hesitated. North America. Daniel's expression changed. The coordinates from the archive. Yes. My city. Yes. Daniel swallowed. And my father? The officer looked at him. Elias Cross was part of the first medical team sent to investigate. Lyra stepped closer. Medical team? The officer nodded. The object wasn't a ship. Daniel frowned. Then what was it? A capsule. Silence. Inside was one thing. What? The officer looked toward Daniel's arm. Something designed to recognize a biological signature. Daniel stared at him. The serum? No. The officer shook his head. The serum came later. Daniel's expression tightened. Then what was inside? The officer answered quietly. A device that could interact with living tissue. Daniel looked down at his forearm. The faint blue pattern was still visible beneath his skin. Lyra whispered, "Why would an alien device be designed to interact with humans?" The officer didn't answer. Daniel stepped closer. Because it was looking for something. The officer's eyes narrowed. Yes. What? A compatible biological signature. Daniel's breathing slowed. And it found me. The officer shook his head. It found your father first. Daniel froze. My father? Elias touched the device. Lyra looked at the officer. And? It activated. The room became silent. Daniel stared at him. What happened? The officer looked away. The device produced the same blue pattern now appearing in your body. Daniel looked at his arm. The symbol. Yes. Then what did my father do? He tried to shut it down. Did he? The officer hesitated. No. Daniel's eyes hardened. What happened? It responded to his DNA. Lyra stepped forward. Meaning? The officer looked at her. It recognized him. Daniel whispered. Like the serum recognized me. The officer nodded. That was the first mistake. Daniel frowned. What was the second? The officer looked toward the black vessel outside. Your father didn't destroy the device. Why? Because he discovered something. What? The officer lowered his voice. The device wasn't activating. Daniel stared. Then what was it doing? It was communicating. A faint vibration moved through the laboratory. Everyone turned toward Daniel. His wound glowed blue. The officer stepped backward. It's happening again. Daniel looked at his arm. What was it communicating? A warning. Lyra's face changed. About what? The officer shook his head. We never translated all of it. Why? Because the council shut the facility down. Daniel's jaw tightened. Why? Because Elias refused to stop. Daniel looked at him. My father refused? Yes. What was he trying to do? The officer stared at Daniel. Understand why the device had chosen your family. Silence. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Chosen? The officer nodded. Elias discovered that the biological response wasn't random. Lyra looked at Daniel. It was hereditary. The officer nodded. Your father believed the device wasn't searching for humans. Daniel stared at him. What was it searching for? The officer answered. Something in the cross line. Daniel's expression hardened. Why? We never found out. The black vessel outside suddenly pulsed blue. The same symbol appeared across its hull. Daniel stepped toward the window. The symbol was identical to the one beneath his skin. Lyra whispered. It knows you're here. The officer shook his head. No. Everyone looked at him. It knew he was coming. Daniel turned. What? The officer looked toward the vessel. That ship has been waiting for 19 years. Silence. Daniel stared at the black hull. Waiting for me? The officer didn't answer. Instead, he walked toward the medical archive. Show him the recovered file. The researcher hesitated. The file is unstable. Show him. The terminal flickered. A corrupted recording appeared. A laboratory. 19 years ago. Daniel recognized the room immediately. The same white walls. The same medical table. The same blue symbol. His breathing stopped. That's where I was. Lyra stood beside him. Yes. The recording continued. Elias Cross appeared on screen. Younger. Worried. He was speaking to someone outside the camera frame. We don't know what the device is doing. A second voice answered. Then destroy it. Elias shook his head. We can't. Why? Because it stopped responding to me. The voice became tense. Then what is it responding to? Elias looked toward the medical table. The recording shifted. A 12-year-old Daniel lay unconscious beneath a medical scanner. Daniel stepped backward. No. Lyra watched the recording. Elias continued. It responded when my son entered the room. The room became completely silent. Daniel stared at his younger self. His father's voice continued. The pattern appeared immediately. A blue circle formed on the monitor around Daniel's chest. Elias looked terrified. The device isn't treating him. A pause. It's identifying him. Daniel closed his eyes. The recording distorted. Then Elias said something that made Lyra freeze. He isn't the patient. The image broke apart. Daniel opened his eyes. What did he mean? The researcher tried to stabilize the recording. The picture returned. Elias was standing beside the table. His face was pale. Someone off camera asked, Then what is he? Elias stared at Daniel. I don't know. The recording suddenly became louder. An alarm began screaming. Elias turned. What happened? A scientist shouted from somewhere outside the frame. The device is opening. Elias rushed toward the console. Shut it down. We can't. Disconnect the power. There is no power connection. Elias froze. The blue symbol expanded across the room. Then every monitor displayed the same message. Biological match confirmed. Daniel stared. Lyra whispered. Confirmed with what? The recording continued. Elias stepped toward the medical table. His voice trembled. Daniel? The 12-year-old Daniel opened his eyes. The recording froze. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then a new line appeared. Memory suppression protocol initiated. Daniel stepped backward. They erased it. Lyra nodded. But why? The recording resumed. Elias was arguing with another scientist. You can't erase his memory. We have no choice. He's my son. He's the only surviving compatible subject. Daniel froze. Surviving? The researcher looked at him. Lyra slowly turned toward the screen. The recording continued. Elias stepped in front of the camera. If you erase his memory, he won't know what happened. The other scientist answered, That is the point. Elias shook his head. They'll come back. Who? Elias looked toward the blue symbol. I don't know. A pause. But whatever sent that device? His voice dropped. It knows he exists. The recording suddenly distorted. Then one final image appeared. Elias standing beside Daniel, his hand resting on his son's shoulder. He looked directly into the camera. If Daniel ever remembers this, the screen flickered. Tell him I tried to keep him away from it. The recording ended. Daniel stood completely still. For the first time, there was no anger on his face, only confusion. You told me my father died. The officer looked at him. I told you what the council wanted you to believe. Daniel turned slowly. Then what happened to Elias? The officer remained silent. Daniel stepped closer.
What happened after the memory suppression?
The officer looked toward the archive. The facility was attacked. By whom? We don't know. Then how did I survive? The officer looked directly at him. Your father got you out. Daniel froze. Where? We don't know. Then how did I end up in the hospital? The officer shook his head. You didn't. Daniel's expression changed. What? The hospital record was fabricated. Silence. Lyra looked at the officer. You're saying Daniel was never admitted to a hospital? No. Daniel's breathing became shallow. Then where was I? The officer hesitated. Elias took you somewhere the council couldn't find you. Where? We never recovered the location. Daniel stared at him. And Elias? The officer looked away. He disappeared. Daniel said nothing. His eyes remained fixed on the officer. And the council never found him? No. Then why are they still afraid? The officer didn't answer. The blue symbol beneath Daniel's skin began glowing again. The black vessel responded. Lyra looked toward the window. It's synchronized. Daniel stared at the vessel. No. He stepped closer. It isn't responding to me. Lyra looked at him. Then what is it responding to? Daniel looked down at his arm. His eyes narrowed. The memory. The vessel pulsed again. A section of its hull opened. Inside was darkness. Then a single blue light appeared, the same blue light Daniel had seen 19 years ago. The researcher checked the sensors. Princess. What? The vessel is transmitting biological signatures. Lyra looked at the display. How many? The researcher hesitated. 2. Daniel turned. One matches me. Yes. And the second? The researcher stared at the data. His expression changed. The database can't identify the individual. Daniel stepped closer. Then what did it identify? The researcher entered another command. The system processed the signal. Then a new classification appeared. Family line match detected. Lyra stared. The researcher nodded. Daniel stared at the classification. The researcher nodded. The system recognizes the bloodline. Daniel's expression tightened. But not the person. The researcher shook his head. No. A long silence. Then the black vessel suddenly transmitted a message. Not in Helian. Not in council code. In English. A language Daniel knew. A language his father had spoken to him when he was a child. If you remember me. The transmission paused. Daniel stared at the screen. Then the second line appeared. They will come for you. Daniel froze. He knew that voice. But before he could speak, the blue light beneath his skin answered. The black vessel vanished from every sensor. No jump signature, no engine flare, no trace. Just gone. The laboratory remained silent. Then the medical archive activated one final time. A single line appeared. Cross-biological signal active. Daniel stared at it. Lyra whispered, Daniel. He didn't answer. Another line appeared beneath it. Origin unknown. Daniel slowly looked toward the darkness where the vessel had been. Then, the blue pattern beneath his skin pulsed once, and somewhere deep inside the memory that had been erased 19 years ago. Something answered. The laboratory remained silent. On the medical archive, two lines remained illuminated. Cross-biological signal active. Origin unknown. Daniel stared at them. The black vessel was gone, but the blue pattern beneath his skin was still pulsing. Lyra stepped closer. Daniel. He didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the screen. The researcher checked the sensors again. No vessel. He looked at the readings. No transmission. Daniel finally spoke. Then why is the signal still active? Nobody answered. Daniel closed his eyes. And the laboratory disappeared. White light. Cold metal. A 12-year-old Daniel stood inside the laboratory. 19 years earlier, his father stood beside the original device. Alias Cross. The blue object floated between them. But this time, the memory continued beyond everything Daniel had seen before. A map appeared above the device. Not of Earth. The galaxy. Thousands of worlds appeared across the darkness. Some were bright. Others were completely black. Young Daniel stared. What are those? Elias looked at the map. Civilizations. One light disappeared. Then another. Then another. Daniel looked at his father. Where did they go? Elias was silent. Finally, they answered. To what? Elias looked at the device. The signal. Daniel frowned. What did it ask them? Elias looked at his son. It didn't ask them anything. Then how did they fail? Elias's expression became serious. It gave them something. The map changed. Alien civilizations discovering the same technology. Some studied it. Some worshipped it. Some turned it into weapons. Some tried to destroy it. Every time, the same result. Darkness. Daniel whispered. Did they all die? Most. Why? Elias looked at the device. Because they thought the technology was the test. Daniel looked at him. What was the test? Elias placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Themselves. Daniel's eyes opened. The laboratory returned. Lyra was beside him. What did you see? Daniel breathed slowly. My father. What did he show you? Daniel looked at the archive. A choice. The researcher stepped closer. What choice? Daniel's arm pulsed. Every screen in the laboratory activated. 3 symbols appeared. USA, destroy, understand. Lyra stared. The same symbols. Daniel nodded. The device showed them to my father. The researcher examined the code. These aren't instructions. Daniel looked at him. Then what are they? The researcher swallowed. A decision. The 3 symbols disappeared. A new message appeared. The choice is not the test. Daniel stared. Another line appeared. What you do after the choice is silence. Lyra slowly understood. It isn't testing what humanity chooses. Daniel nodded. It's testing what humanity becomes after choosing. The screen changed. Images filled the laboratory. Human history, wars, nuclear weapons, disasters, collapse. Humanity repeatedly approaching the edge of destroying itself. But every time, it continued. The voice returned. Not loud, not threatening, simply ancient. Your species was not selected because it was peaceful. Daniel looked toward the screen. Then why us? The answer came. Because you survived yourselves. Lyra stared at Daniel. The researcher whispered. That was the test. Daniel shook his head. No. They looked at him. The test was whether we could hold power. He looked toward the three symbols, without becoming its slave. The laboratory went silent. The voice answered. Correct. The black vessel appeared again. This time, above the Aurelia. Every tactical system activated. The researcher looked at the display. Multiple contacts. 1 point became 10. 10 became hundreds. Then thousands. Then 12,147. Lyra stepped toward the window. They're surrounding us. Daniel watched the ships. Are they attacking? No. The researcher zoomed in. They're waiting. For what? The answer appeared across the main display. Humanity's decision. Daniel looked at the three symbols. You see, destroy, understand. Lyra turned toward him. What happens if we choose nothing? The screen answered. The choice will be made for you. Daniel looked at Earth below. For 19 years, humanity had hidden the truth. The Council had buried it. Scientists had suppressed it. His father had sacrificed everything to keep it away from him. And now, the decision belonged to him. Daniel stepped toward the console. Lyra stopped him. Daniel, he looked at her. If you choose wrong, I know, you could put the entire planet at risk. Daniel looked at the blue pattern beneath his skin, then at Earth. We've spent 19 years being afraid of what this thing can do. He touched the screen. We never asked what we could do with it. His finger moved toward the third symbol. Understand. Daniel pressed it. Nothing happened. For one long second, the galaxy remained silent. Then the vessel responded. Choice recorded. The thousands of ships began moving. Lyra looked outside. They're leaving. The researcher checked the trajectories. His expression changed. No. Daniel turned. They're not leaving. The researcher pointed toward Earth. They're moving into orbit. The ship stopped. Thousands of vessels forming a vast ring around the planet. Not an invasion fleet, a perimeter. A witness. Then the voice returned. The species has chosen understanding. A pause. Observation will end. Daniel looked toward the stars. What happens now? The voice answered. Now humanity must live with its choice. The blue light beneath Daniel's skin faded. The black vessel began disappearing. But before it vanished, one final message appeared. The signal belongs to humanity now. Then the vessel was gone. Every communication system on Earth activated. Military networks, civilian networks, scientific stations, council channels. Every screen displayed the same message. Humanity has answered. For the first time, there was no council order, no alien command, no hidden protocol, just silence. Then the message disappeared. The researchers slowly looked at Daniel. It's over. Daniel stared at his arm. The blue pattern was fading. No. Lyra looked at him. What? Daniel touched the last remaining trace of blue light. It isn't over. A pause. But it is ours now. The medical archive suddenly activated. A file appeared. Project Cross. Final record. Daniel stared. Open it. The researcher hesitated, then activated the file. A familiar face appeared. Elias, older than Daniel remembered. Tired, sitting alone in a dark room. Daniel stopped breathing. His father looked directly into the camera. If you're seeing this, Elias paused. Then the signal has finally answered. Daniel stepped closer. Elias continued. I don't know how long you've been searching for me. Daniel's eyes filled with emotion. But if you remember everything now, his father gave a faint smile. Then I succeeded. Daniel shook his head. No, Elias continued. I couldn't destroy the device. I couldn't hide it forever. And I couldn't protect you by keeping you ignorant. He looked down for a moment. So I made another choice. The screen changed. Images appeared. Elias entering the facility. Elias carrying young Daniel away. Elias sealing the original device. Elias disappearing into the underground complex. Daniel watched silently. His father continued. I stayed behind. To keep the signal away from you. To keep the council from finding you. And to make sure that when humanity finally encountered it again, Elias looked directly into the camera. You would be old enough to choose for yourself. Daniel whispered. Dad. Elias smiled faintly. I always knew they would come back. A pause. But I didn't know what humanity would become by then. He looked toward the camera. Now I know. The recording began degrading. Elias spoke quickly. Daniel. The screen flickered. You were never chosen because you were special. Daniel froze. You were chosen because you could hear the question. A final pause. And humanity, Elias smiled, was chosen because it could answer. The recording ended. Nobody spoke. Daniel stood before the dead screen. Lyra slowly approached him. You waited 19 years for that? Daniel shook his head. No. He looked toward Earth. My father waited 19 years for this. Outside the Aurelia, the thousands of alien vessels remained in orbit. Watching, but not attacking, not commanding, waiting for humanity to decide what came next. The researcher looked at the data. The signal is completely inactive. Daniel glanced at his arm. The blue pattern was gone. For the first time in 19 years, there was nothing beneath his skin. No signal, no voice, no command, just his own heartbeat. Daniel smiled faintly. Lyra looked at him. What are you going to do now? Daniel looked toward Earth, then toward the stars. For the first time, he took a breath. We decide for ourselves. The laboratory lights returned to normal. Outside, the galaxy remained silent, not because humanity had been forgotten, not because the danger was gone, but because for the first time, humanity was no longer waiting for someone else to tell it what to become. Daniel looked at the Earth below, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the stars, the ancient signal finally went silent.